Okay. All right. So we talked about, physics is just the study of the physical environment surrounding us, not just the environment here on Earth, but out into the universe as well. So it's the study of matter, energy, and the interactions between the two. All right. So it's one of the most fundamental scientific disciplines. And the main goal is just to understand how the universe behaves. Right. So this first part, physics one, is the study of motion, forces, energy, atoms, and light waves. The second part is electricity and magnetism. Um, so I'm not sure if you guys have to take part two, but if you do, those will be the topics that are covered next time around. All right, so moving on. We talked about the fundamental properties of physics. So we have length, which is the distance between 2 points. All right, it's usually measured in meters. We're going to use the SI unit system. So I know here in America, we use miles for our distance, but for scientific purposes, we'll be using meters. For the mass, we're going to be using kilograms. And for time, we're going to be using seconds. All right, so conversions and dimensions. So you need to know how to convert SI between the SI unit prefixes. Table 1.4 here. These are the prefixes, and I told you guys from -12 to +12. All right, that's going to be our range of what we're working from in physics. Okay, each of these powers, powers of 10, has a prefix. All right, and an abbreviation for that prefix. Okay. So let me minimize that so we can move on. All right, so for examples, you need to know how to convert, days down to hours to minutes to seconds. All right. Being able to convert from centimeters to meters or grams to kilograms. And in physics, we also use different dimensions to denote, the nature of physical quantities. So area, that's your length times your width. Volume is length times width times height. Velocity, that is the distance over time, and acceleration is the measure of velocity over time. So let me keep it moving. All right, so I have your prefixes here as well. So you can look at them here or in your book. All right, so what we're gonna do, I'm gonna work with you through some conversions so you can get the hang of how we go back and forth between conversions. All right, so let me pull up my whiteboard here. All right, so number one, we are going to convert 33.4 millimeters to meters. So I know this is, class through Zoom, but you guys do need to be taking notes. All right. All right. Number one. All right. So we're going from 33.4 millimeters to meters. All right. So how I usually set mine up is table conversions. If you have your own method that you use, stick to what is best for you. Okay. Because not everything works for everybody, and that's fine. However you learned it, and it was easier for you to work through and memorize. Sometimes you can just move the decimal places, and then sometimes, if you forget how many decimal places you need to move, you can always go back to the longhand version. So I'm going to show you the longhand version and the shorthand version. So pick whichever one speaks to you. All right. So first, let's do the longhand version. Okay, so we're starting with 33.4 millimeters. And we're trying to convert to meters, right? So if we go back to that table, we'll know that milli, so even though the base of what we're talking about is meters, the prefix is milli, which is 10 to the minus third power. Okay, and we're trying to go from that to the base, which is in between -1 and +1. So it's in between deci and deca. All right, so we're trying to get to 10 to the 0 power, which is in between those two. But we're starting from milli. All right, so we need to move pretty much 3 decimal places to get where we need to be. All right, so this is the longhand version. All right, we know 1 millimeter is equal to 10 to the minus third meters. So once we multiply in our calculator across the top, so 33.4 times 10 to the minus third, technically the decimal place is going to move 3 places to the left. So 1, 2, 3. All right, so you can type that in your calculator, or you can just move it 3 decimal places to your left. So if it's a negative exponent, you move your decimal to the left. If it was a positive exponent, you would move your decimal to the right. Right. So whichever method you want to do, just pick whatever speaks to you. Right. So after you type that into your calculator, when you do it long ways, you would end up with 0.0334 meters. All right, because the millimeters in the numerator and the millimeters in the denominator cancel out. All right, so that was the longhand version. Shorthand version, you just move the decimal place over. All right, depending on your exponent. So here, if we move the decimal place 3 places to the left, you will move 1 place, 2 place, and then you would have to add a 0 to get that 3rd place. Right. So that's how you would know that it's 0.0334 years. Right? So you can multiply it out long ways, or you can move the decimal place over, which this can kind of get tedious when you have to move it over like a large number. So that's why I say I will go ahead and try to multiply that in your calculator. So that was number 1. Let's try to see if I can fit number 2 down here. Number 2. Okay, so number 2, we're going from 1,500 centimeters to kilometers. All right, 1,500 centimeters to kilometers. All right, so again, we're going to do this longhand ways. So let's put the 1,500 centimeters here and set that up. Okay, so we know that centi, so if we go back to our table here, centi is 10 to the minus second power, right? So we need to, put that information in here. So let's go back. All right, so 1 centimeter is equal to 10 to the minus second meters. All right, but we're not stopping at meters. Okay, we're going to kilometers. So we need to add that conversion in here. So if we go back to the table, we'll see that kilometers is down here, which is K. All right, that's 10 to the 3rd power. So we're going from a negative exponent to a positive exponent. All right, so let's extend the table. Okay. So it was 10 to the 3rd power for kilometers. So 10 to the 3rd power is the same thing as saying 10 times 10 times 10 3 times. All right. So we know that 10 times 10 is 100, and then 100 times 10 is 1,000. Okay, so let me erase that off. Go back to my pen. All right, so we know 1,000 meters, 1,000 meters is equal to 1 kilometer. Right? So technically right here, this is the 10 to the third power right here. I just wrote it out as 1,000, but you can write 10 to the third power here if that if that's what you prefer. Let me go back. 10 to the third meters equals 1 kilometer. Okay, so if we were to put this in our calculator, right, we would get a 0.015 kilometers. Okay. All right. So since we started from centi, that was 10 to the minus 2. And then kili was 10 to the third. So technically what we did was move the decimal place 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, right? So how we do decimal points, and I think this was probably covered in, I'm not sure which math, but when you have 10 to the minus 2 in the numerator and 10 to the third in the denominator, technically what you're doing is you're subtracting those exponents. So it's going to be minus 2 minus 3. All right, so that becomes a plus negative, so it's negative 5. So that's why we move the decimal place over 5 times to the left. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then add a 0 for 5. So that's how we ended up here. We took the minus 2 that's in the numerator and we subtracted 3 in the denominator. Because since it's on the bottom, you're subtracting it. So let me write it out so you can visualize it. All right, so this is the same as saying 10 to the minus 2 minus 3 power. And what you did was you just added a negative. So it ended up being 10 to the minus 5. Does that make sense? Because it's in the denominator, we're subtracting it instead of adding it.
Yes, it makes sense.
All right, let me erase that. Okay, any questions from number 1 or number 2? All right, if not, we're gonna move on to number 3. So let me erase this and start from scratch. All right, number 3. All right, number 3, we're going from 0.23 kilograms to centigrams. So let's write that 0.23 kg to cg. Right, kilograms to centigrams. All right. Okay, so let's start longhand ways. Got the 0 to 3 kilograms. And let's do our long division. All right, so we know that 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 grams. So if we go back, we know kilo is 10 to the third power. So that's 10 multiplied by itself 3 times. So 10 times 10 is 100, and 100 times 10 is 1,000. Right, so we know 1 kilogram is equal to 1,000 grams, or you could write 10 to the third grams. So you can either write 1,000 all the way out, or you can just say 10 to the third power, and that's in grams. All right, and then to go from grams to centigrams, we got to go back to centi, which is here. That's 10 to the minus 2 power. All right, so we're going to put that in there. All right, so 10 to the minus 2 power in grams is equal to 1 centigram. All right, so we got the kilograms in the numerator and the denominator are going to cancel out. Then we have the grams in the numerator and the denominator are going to cancel out. So we're going to be left with centigrams, which is what we're trying to get to here. All right, so once you do 0.23 times 10 to the third calculate in your calculator, and then divide that by 10 to the minus 2, you'll end up with 23,000 centigrams. All right, so our shorthand version here is going to be 3 minus 2. So 3 minus a negative 2 is actually going to be 5. So that's why we're going to the decimal place to the right 5 times. So let me do this down here. So we're doing 10 to the third over 10 to the minus second, which is equal to 10 to the third power minus a negative second power. All right, so when you have a double negative, you're going to add. All right, so 3 minus a negative 2 is going to be plus plus, right? So this is going to be 10 to the fifth power. So that's why we're going from 0.23 and we're going over 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 decimal places. So that's why we added all of these zeros. You can just pick one. You can pick whichever one. Okay, so your shorthand version just turns dividing exponents into adding and subtracting exponents so that you can move your decimal place yourself. However, if you want to just plug all this stuff into the calculator and not worry about these decimal places, you can do that as well. All right, number 4. Okay, number 4 is asking us to go from 90 millimeters to centimeters. So let's go from 90 millimeters to centimeters. All right, so if we go back, we'll see that centi and milli is right next to each other. So technically all we're doing is moving the decimal place over once. All right, but I'm gonna go ahead and work this out so we can see it. All right, 90 millimeters. Okay, so we know that 1 millimeter is equal to 10 to the third minus third meters. All right, and then we know that 10 to the minus second meters is equal to 1 centimeter. Right, so millimeters and millimeters cancel out, and then meters and meters cancel out. So we're left with centimeters, which is what we're trying to go to anyway. All right, so if you do 90 times 10 to the minus third, and then divide it by 10 to the minus second power, you'll end up with 9 centimeters. All right, that's the longhand version. Shorthand version, do short version. Okay, so we have 10 to the minus third in the numerator. And then we got 10 to the minus second, 10 to the minus second in the denominator, which is going to be equal to 10 which is our base number. This is the power of tens that we're working with. We're going to have minus 3. Minus 3, the division sign is now turned into a minus. And then we have a minus 2 in the bottom. Minus 2, right? These are double negatives, which equals a positive, right? So if I write that back out, that's minus 3 plus 2 on that power of 10, which is going to be 10 to the minus 1 power, because negative 3 plus positive 2 is negative 1. All right, so if we were to write 90 here, we're going to go to the left one time, because a negative exponent means you go to the left, you move to the left. Positive exponent means you move to the right. Okay, so if we move from 9 or 1 over, we're going to get 9. So we move that decimal point from here to here. So that's how we got this. All right, number 5. All right, number 5, we're going from 23 milliliters to liters. All right, so let's do the longhand first. All right, so if we go back to our table, we know that milli is 10 to the minus third power. We're trying to go from milli to the base unit of liters, which is going to be pretty much 10 to the 0 power, which is in between deci and deca. All right, so let's go back. All right, so 1 milliliter is equal to 10 to the minus third liters. All right, so these milliliters and milliliters cancel out, so we're going to be left with liters, which is what we're trying to get to. So in your calculator, you could just type out 23 times 10 to the minus third power, and you would get 0.023 liters. All right, technically we just got 10 to the minus third power. So all we're doing is moving to the left 3 times. So if we got 23 right here, we're gonna go over to the left 1, 2, 3 decimal places. All right, so that's how we get the 0.023 liters. Okay. All right, that is number 5. So let's move on to number 6. So let me make some space. All right, because this one looks slightly different from the other ones that we've just done. So 4.5 times 10 to the minus 30 liters. And we're converting that to kilometers. So we're going from meters to kilometers. Okay. So let's go ahead and set up this long division point. So 4.5 times 10 to the minus 30 liters. All right. So if we go here, back to our table, we know that kilo, is 10 to the third power. All right. So we're converting from meters to kilometers. So 1,000 meters, because 10 to the third power is 10 times 10 times 10, which is 1,000. So we can write out, we can either put 10 to the third here, meters, or we can write out 1,000 meters. So how you want to kind of set it up is up to you. Okay, so if we put that in our calculator, we would do 4.5 times 10 to the minus third divided by 10 to the third, right? And we would get 4.5 times 10 to the minus 6 kilometers. And let me go ahead and do the shorthand version. Okay, so if you look at our exponents here, in the numerator we have 10 to the minus 10. In the denominator we have 10 to the minus third in the numerator, and then 10 to the third in the denominator, which that is 10 to the minus 3 minus 3, all right, which is turning into, so plus a negative. So plus, all right, so you're adding minus 3 plus a minus 3, and we get a minus 6. All right, so we just turned that minus into a plus negative. All right, so that's how we went from 10 to the minus 3 to 10 to the minus 6 for our exponent. The 4.5 remains the same. That's still the base number. It's just the exponent that changed. All right. Okay, let's try number 7. Okay, so they're telling us to go from 12,000 milliseconds to seconds. All right, so let's start out with the 12,000 milliseconds. All right, do our division. All right, so if we go back to milli in the chart, we know that milli is 10 to the minus third. All right, so that's what we're using. We know that 1 millisecond is equal to 10 to the minus third seconds. So the milliseconds and the milliseconds cancel out. So we multiply 12,000 times 10 to the minus third, and we just end up moving the decimal place to the left 3 times. So 1, 2, 3, and we'll end up with 12 seconds. All right, so all we did for the shorthand version, 1, 2, 3, was move that decimal place to the right, to the left, 1, 2, 3 points. So that's how we ended up with 12. Okay, last but not least, we're going from centi to milli. So number 8, we're going from 6 to 6.7 centimeters to millimeters. Okay, so if you remember, centi is 10 to the minus 2, and milli is 10 to the minus 3. So the only difference between the two is 1 decimal place. Right? That's it, just 1. The difference between 2 and 3 is just 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and set it up the long way, and then I'll show you it the short way. So 66.7 centimeters. All right, so we know that in 1 centimeter, we have 10 to the minus second meter. All right. And then in 10 to the minus third meters is 1 millimeter. So the centimeters cancel out, the meters cancel out, so we're left with the millimeters at the end. Okay, so we ended up with, you end up with, oh, not on the pen. That's what's going on. 6, 6, 7, 9 meters. All right. So that was the longhand version. Shorthand version is that we had 10 to the minus 2 in the numerator, and then we had 10 to the minus 3 in the denominator. So that came out to 10 to the minus 2 minus negative 3, which ended up being 10 to the minus 2 plus 3, which is 10 to the first power. So all we did was move to the decimal place to the right once, because the 1 is positive and not negative. So 66.7, and then we move it to the right once to get 667. All right. Okay, so right now it is 12:41. So I'll stop right there for the conversions. Tomorrow we'll go, not tomorrow, sorry. Friday.